Will the December 10th, 2013 meeting of the Contractors State License Board please come to order? I am Joan Hancock, Board Chair. I'm going to ask Ed Lang, Secretary, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will Aaron Eckerd please call the roll?
Here. Here.
Thank you. I'd like to note that John O'Rourke has an excused absence. And now will the board members and senior staff members please introduce themselves, and then we'll move from our table out to the audience, to the folks in the audience. It's not mandatory that you introduce yourself, but please do. We'd like to get to know you. Starting with you, Ed.
Ed Lang, board member.
Cindy Christensen, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Board member.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Legislation.
Bruce Russ, board member.
Dave Fote, Chief of Enforcement.
Don Chang, Legal Counsel, Consumer Affairs.
Kurt Epler, Staff Counsel.
Rick Lopes.
Nancy Springer, Board Member. Okay. Karen Robinson, Chief of Licensing.
Frank Schutter, Board Member. That's loud.
And go ahead and start with Joyce Abdelaziz. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Building Code Consultant and member of the board. Steve.
Deidre Green, Peace Officer.
Great, thank you. All right, at this time, I would just like to mention a word of thanks on behalf of the board to the Norwalk staff for hosting lunch, and congratulate Janice Hargrave? Hartz? Janice Hartz on her retirement. And also, I want to thank our staff up in Sacramento for the hard work that they do putting this packet together. A lot of folks usually go unmentioned, and I'm just going to shout out to Melanie Bedwell and thank you for your last-minute help to make this happen. We have a busy agenda here today, so we're going to get on with it, but we're not going to move too fast before we recognize a very important individual here, and I'm going to ask Linda Clifford if she would take over in that responsibility.
If everybody would join me in singing Happy Birthday to Frank. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Frank. Happy birthday to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda. Maybe you'll be our honorary from now on birthdays. Today we are, well, prior to doing that, are there any comments from any of the board members on any interesting goings-on? Or comments from committee meetings, last board meeting? This is your chance. All right, anybody from the public? Okay, we're going to do that. Now we're going to turn to a very important agenda item C, and we're here today also to remember a good friend of the board, Sam Abdulaziz. Sam was a legal counsel to the board. He came to most of our meetings, not in that official capacity, but as an amicus, as a friend of the board, to help guide us through several years of issues that predominate and still are because of Sam. It didn't matter what the conversation was about. It could be relative to industry, it could be relative to labor, it could be relative to just basic goings-on, relative to contract law. I think board members would agree that Sam was a very approachable person. I personally found him not just charming, but self-effacing. He just was that kind of person. When he would come to the meetings, he never drew attention to himself. You know, go around and the public would introduce themselves, and Sam would say, you know, you do that. You always do that arm wave. That's how I remember him, as a person that just really cared so much about what he did and about this board, and didn't need to show himself off in any way. I had, on November 16th at our executive committee meeting, I had the unfortunate responsibility of informing the board of his passing. And we're here also to just remember him as this really larger-than-life legal lion in the state of California. Well-versed, probably the legal expert in the area of construction law. We're also honoring Sam's family. They've introduced themselves. They're in the first two rows over here, and we're really glad you're here, and it's really our privilege to be able to do this today for Sam and for all of you. We have a 30 to 60 minute program, and Steve Sands is going to take over and lead us through that program, so thank you.
A couple of things. We have coffee because the heater went out in the hotel. It's kind of cool in here, so we have free coffee in back. Public comment session will be after this agenda item, in case there's some confusion about that. Today we have some speakers. I'll run through the scheduled list. Be myself, Matt Kelly, Dave Fote, Margie Green, Rick Pierce, Phil Vermeulen, Steve Latonin, Ken Grossbart, and Mike Abdulaziz. When I first was being considered to be registrar, the Davis administration wanted to vet me and, you know, see if the industry or labor would be okay with this guy from the Architects Board. Would he be okay to, you know, take over the Contractors Board? The first person I had to go visit was Sam Abdulaziz. And Lynn Morris, who is the Deputy Director for Board Relations, we flew down to Pasadena, had lunch with Sam. Of course, we paid for it. And had a lovely lunch. And, you know, I said, well, I hope I passed my first test. Well, I went back to my job as executive officer of the Architects Board, and 3 days later, I got the nicest letter from Sam saying, I really enjoyed lunch, nice meeting you, went on and on. He concluded by saying, by the way, after meeting you, I've decided to apply to be registrar of the Contractors Board. So began a long friendship between Sam and myself. Sam was very generous. He was very nice. He was always going out of his way to be nice to the staff and the board members. I remember once he invited me down. I had a meeting down here, and he said, look, when you come down, I'll pick you up at your hotel. I'm going to take you to the Magic Castle. I don't know who's ever been there. It's where they have all the magicians and Holly. It's incredible. I said, look, I'll pick you up. I'll take you out to dinner. Then I'll take you to the Magic Castle. So Sam picked me up, took me to Carl's Jr.'s, made me pay, and took me to the Magic Castle. It was an incredible night. But finally, his generosity and love was expansive. My daughter was applying to go to UCLA, and Sam loved UCLA. You'll hear probably stories about Sam's relationship with the sports empire at UCLA, especially for those USC grads who will go unnamed or unmentioned. Anyway, Mike and Sam, my whole family came down. We were going to tour UCLA. So my wife Jan, my daughter Sarah, who was applying to UCLA, and my daughter Emily. And we went to Sam's office, which looks more like a sports museum than a law office. It's sports memorabilia everywhere. And we went to UCLA. And this is my 18-year-old and 16-year-old daughter. Sam takes us directly to the Hall of Fame. So we could spend the whole day looking at all the NCAA trophies that UCLA had earned over the years. I think UCLA has more NCAA championships than any other school in the country. Not USC, it's UCLA. Anyway, Sarah wasn't really sold on UCLA after spending her whole tour in the athletic department. However, she did get accepted to UCLA. She is a junior there now, and I can't thank Mike and Sam enough. And now there's another Bruin on the way to join Sam's legacy. And now I'd like to ask Matt Kelly to come up.
I don't know if I'm really qualified to say too many things about Sam, because honestly, he's somebody that I admired tremendously. I met Sam when I came to the board 10 years ago, and being an industry official, he and I hit it off right away. And it became apparent to me right away what he had done for the construction industry, unbeknownst to probably many of the vast majority of them. What he did for our industry was ensure that contractors were protected. He advocated for legislation that would ensure that contractors would have a mechanism to be paid, and that consumers would have a mechanism to protect themselves should the contractor do something that they weren't supposed to. Having spent my formative years in Southern California, I had a great affinity for the Southern California professional sports teams like Sam. So he absolutely was a fan of the greatest baseball organization that exists, the Los Angeles Dodgers. And having known that he went to fantasy camp with the Dodgers, I was forever envious of him. But truly, it was a friendship that probably would have never happened had I not been on this board. So it's another thing that I value this board for. And there's a beer, Dos Equis, uses a marketing program called The Most Interesting Man in the World. And I joked with him about it more than once and traded emails with him about believing that he was the most interesting man in the world, because he was a tremendous guy. Look at his family. He's got a great family. He's got a namesake in Mike's daughter, and I think that everybody is proud of him more so than I could possibly say, and it was a pleasure knowing him. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Fote, and my remembrance of Sam it goes back to when I was hired by the Contractors Board as an investigator. It was based down here in Southern California, and an investigator named Connie Gontang, if I remember Connie, she introduced me to Sam, and she said, "This is Sam Abdulaziz. He's the godfather of construction, and he knows everything there is to know about contractors' law." And over the years, I found that to be true. But even more so, I found that he had a high level of integrity. He was always honest, and he really cared about the public, that being consumers, contractors, and enforcement staff. We agreed on 95% of the cases that we worked on together, but I want to share one with you. It had to do with a property management company. And Sam was adamant that they didn't need a license. And I said, "This is one case, Sam, where we're going to have to disagree. It looks like it's going to be me against you. You're the defense attorney. I'm going to represent the Contractors Board. We're going to put it in front of an administrative law judge, and we're going to let the judge decide this." Well, that was the first time I ever saw Sam in action as a trial attorney, and I learned a lesson that day. I think you can know what happened. Sam came out, he prevailed, the judge did not sustain. It was Judge Bernie Burns from Southern California, and he wrote an interesting response that, this really complimenting Sam on his handling of this case. He did a fantastic job. And I guess my final thought is that over the years, I had a very close working relationship with Sam. People think I came in on Saturdays because I'm a workaholic. Not necessarily the case. I came in because I could always count on Sam to give me a call around 9 or 10 o'clock just to check in and see what's going on. So he was a great friend, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Margie Green with the Nevada State Contractors Board. And although I've known Sam for many years, it only took one meeting before I realized I had a friend for life. There was never a time that I could call him that he wouldn't return my call no matter how busy he was. He would take time and let me feel like I was the only person that was important to him at that time. I learned so much to him, and while we look at him as interested in the regulation of contractors, he was very much involved in consumer protection. He did more for consumer protection than I think anyone I know, by being fair, knowing that there are two sides to every story, and knowing the value of the Contractors Licensing Board and what it means to the public in both California, Nevada, and across the country. Everyone has some funny Sam stories, and I'm sure all of you do as well, but I remember one time we were at a NASCA conference in New Orleans, and we had gone out to dinner, and Nancy Mathias was with me, and Sam, and a couple of California representatives. Well, it happened to be Halloween in New Orleans, and quite a shock, even for me from Las Vegas. So as we were leaving, and all sorts of characters out on the street, the two of the colleagues from California left. But Sam was a true gentleman and professional, walked us back to our hotel room, while the other two had taken in the sights of New Orleans. He was a true gentleman, a true friend. We'll miss him dearly, and thank you for letting us share our moments about what Sam means to us. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Pierce, and I work for a company now called Basic Crafts. And just to give you a little idea how things move, you used to have a board member named Robert Alvarado that's now my supervisor. And I met Sam 29 years ago, surprisingly, when I worked for a contractor school called Licensed Information Service. And what you might not know, besides all the other wonderful things that Sam did, he also represented and apparently had some stock in a bonding company at one time. And the greatest or one of the greatest compliments he ever paid me was in the mid-1990s after Theron Skiles, who was my mentor and boss at the contractor school, had passed away. He goes, you know, neither you or Theron ever treated me like I was the competition. You always treated me like a friend. And I never thought of him as being a competitor. He was my friend. We did a whole bunch of things that I'm not going to bring up today because the family's here. and this really is what Sam did a lot of the time, was come to these meetings. And I want to be nice to you and say, these are the boringest things you can do with your life. But Sam was smart. He would bring paperwork from the office. He would bring the newspaper, always a sports section, and we always read in the back room. Back there now is Phil and Tony Freschetti. Those are the people we sat there and we talked about all of your business early in the morning, and then we talked about sports and real stuff the rest of the day during the meetings. Couple quick stories that I do want to share with you. Once I got to know Sam well, and the way I got to know Sam well is he would fly to Sacramento for the meeting in San Francisco. And I'd pick him up, and for the next 2 hours, we would talk about sports, and we'd talk about the Contractors Board, and we'd talk about my problems. It never seemed like Sam had a problem. He would make several phone calls to his office, to his children, to his father. Hi, how are you? At first, when he called me and would ask me how I was doing, and I would say fine, and then he would hang up going, this is weird. But then I realized, A, he's an attorney, and time is money, and B, he really just wanted to know if I was okay and didn't care that, you know, there was other business going on or that we're going to see each other tomorrow or something like that. But I got a chance to ride to San Francisco several times or actually I drove. I thought it was kind of like his chauffeur in a little way. But anyway, pick him up at the airport, we'd go to the meetings. And one time we were having the meeting down in San Diego, and Sam decided to take the train. And so I call up Debbie, and I said, Debbie, we're picking up Sam at the train. How can we spoof him? And so her idea was we pick him up, and we got a limo, and we got a sign, and the sign said King Abdul. And so myself and Bob Alvarado are hiding around the corner, and Sam comes off the train, and there's this huge man that is our chauffeur driver, and he's got this sign that says King Abdul, and you could just see Sam's face turn a little bit white, then a little bit red, and then searching for me and Bobby where we were at and why we were doing this to him, and it was a great spoof. I'm going to miss Sam, not nearly as much as the family and the partners and everyone, but I truly think I know a lot about you because when I did see Sam, we did talk about family. And a few years ago, when I got married, Sam and Joyce came up, and Bob Alvarado came to the the marriage meeting, this combination. And Bob Alvarado looks around and he goes, are you having a contractors board meeting? Because Steve was there, and Matt Kelly was there, and Sam was there, and it pretty much was a contractors board meeting, but we threw in a marriage at the same time. And we have a favorite picture of Sam, and that's a picture of him on our wedding day with his UCLA light blue t-shirt and Doris and I. And I just want to say thank you for sharing him with us all these years. I love you all and appreciate it. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm Phil Vermeulen, and I'm here to tell you that I'm the blessed individual to have had a friend like Sam. I started coming to contractor board meetings in February of 1981. And when you start thinking about how many hours that was, well, how did we pass the time? Just like Rick said, if it wasn't for Sam, I don't know how I would have survived them all. Nothing against you guys, but, you know, those meetings kind of drag on. Now, you multiply that since 1981, my God, that's a lot of time. You know, Sam was the most caring person. I mean, he was so concerned about his friends. Like Rick said, he was always calling. I'd get calls several times a week. How you doing? You doing okay? That's what his comments were. Are you doing okay? He really, truly cared about his friends. And he loved his family. His family was so important to him. And he's just literally one of the most generous people I ever met. He was always trying to do things for me. For example, I'd be coming to Southern California, and so many games I got to go to. You know, and when Sam went to the Rose Bowl to watch UCLA play, he was in the big boys tent with all the big important people, because he was one of the very big important people. Seats on the 50-yard line. You know, and then for the basketball games, I got to meet Coach Wooden because of Sam Abdulaziz. And Sam was so generous that he was concerned about all the players, that he donated a lot of his time to make sure that these college kids didn't go astray. I mean, that's how generous Sam was. And his impact on the construction industry is immeasurable. As a lobbyist for all these years, I leaned on him immensely, and he gave so much of his time working with me to make sure that the bills that we got through the legislature made sense, were good for the consumer, good for the contractor. It was a win-win for everybody. And as I said, he's really going to be missed. He was such a special guy. So one of the big issues that we dealt with, and this goes back 25 years ago, the president of the applicant attorneys, a guy by the name of Gary Aguirre, and he and I were locked horns on this, and I can't even remember the bill, as a matter of fact, but we were locked, and Sam was helping me throughout this whole thing, and I unfortunately sat on the board of directors of our CalSMAC at the time, our workers' comp company, so my wife and I had to go to the Cayman Islands for a board meeting, and we're over there, and I had been battling back and forth with this Gary Aguirre. What happens? We get a flower delivery one time in the Cayman Islands, and I'm looking at this gorgeous bouquet, and I go, what is this, you know? Open up the card and says, with love from Gary Aguirre. Sam had sent those to the Cayman Islands just to put a little dig into us. That was Sam, always the character. I could go on. I mean, how do you cap up somebody that you've known since 1981? But he was such a generous man, and we're all blessed and richly rewarded, and he'll always be in our memories. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Latonin. I've known, or had known Sam, I think we met in the mid-'70s. In Los Angeles. Sam was very active with just about all of the trade associations, and certainly the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors was an association, both as a state association and a group of local associations that Sam really was active and a tremendous help. I think he was the official attorney for at least 6 or 7 of our locals, and certainly for our state association. So I got to know him that way. I also got to know Sam as a business partner because we owned a small share in a newsletter operation, and it really wasn't much of an operation, but it was an opportunity for us, well, I should say for Sam to call me and tell me what I wasn't doing right most of the time. I think you'll find when people know Sam, you know, there was the friendship part, but the better friends you were with Sam, the more he was on your case just to make sure you were doing the right thing, that you were active. And certainly with regard to the Contractor State License Board, it was important to Sam that we all participate. Because it was a very important thing to our associations, it was important to the construction industry, and it was important to Sam. So he would call me, he would call Phil and say, are you guys going to be at the meeting? You have to be at the meeting. Well, the problem was Sam took care of everything so well, we didn't feel like we had to go to the meetings after a while. You know, it got to be where, for instance, in the, when Jerry Brown in his first term kind of took over and wanted to change things, he politicized the board to a great extent. You know, he put some people on the board that were there to make waves and shake the board up a little bit. And that started a relationship for many years. And Sam got so active that he was so impatient with the board that he started doing board minutes. And I tell you, until 4 or 5 years ago, those were the minutes we read. We didn't ever read your minutes. We read Sam's minutes. And he got a little impatient sometimes, and so he'd come in and I'd say, shouldn't you be over there doing your minutes? And he said, I wrote them last night. So, that was Sam. It was in good humor, but it was also that he was so serious about what was happening with the board that from start to finish, even though Rick says that they were in the back reading the sports section, it was because Sam had already done all the thinking and talking, and he was prepared for what was going to happen that day at the board meeting. The other thing, of course, everybody says being a friend of Sam's was a very personal matter. I don't think it was an error that he knew in the association, he knew all of our staff. He knew our wives, he knew our children. He made sure when he called to say, how's Gretchen? How's Matt doing? And, that was a very personal touch. I always used to make a joke because he'd call and say, I'm going to be in Sacramento Monday. Why don't I stop by and we can, get up to speed? And I'd say, well, you're going to be in Sacramento Monday, but how many people are you going to see on Monday? Because I know that he would come up and in the course of one day, he'd see 20 people somehow. So I said, just fit me in between SMACNA and the roofing contractors, and I'll be fine. So, it's great for us to remember Sam, and certainly, as everybody said, the feelings that he had for the family were tremendous. We didn't get to see Joyce half as often as we would have liked to have seen her, but, Sam also thought coming to a license board meeting with us, he was there at the meeting all day, but then we'd go out and we'd stay out kind of late, and we'd have a few drinks, and I think we'd get boring. And I never could figure out how Sam could drink water and stay up till 2 o'clock with us, because we had to be the most obnoxious, boring people there were. But Sam was there right to the bitter end, because that's the way he was. If he was at a license board meeting, he was going to be there first thing in the morning till the last person was up at night. So we do miss Sam. So thankful for all of the family to show up here so that we can share these memories. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Grossbart, and I have the great pleasure of being Sam's law partner since 1979. Not a partner at that point, but shortly thereafter. But Sam and I worked together in the legal field since 1978, when I law clerked for him before I became an attorney, and then had the great pleasure of not having to send more than one resume out. That was him. He hired me on the spot, didn't have to pound the pavement looking for a job. I can give you a lot of Sam stories, having the pleasure of working with him every single day for over 30 years. But I'll leave that to the guys and gals who know him as well. What I'm here for, besides stepping aside my USC allegiance, being a Trojan alumni, I guess this is not the right place to be today. I'm actually here to thank you, thank the board, thank the state of California. I know most of you, certainly the guys in the back row, because of Sam. I didn't get out much when he was actively working, because he took care of every single board meeting. It was his family, his second family. He loved it more than anything else. I would have loved to have been part of all of the fun that you guys talk about. I would have been sitting next to him drinking a glass of water as well. But nonetheless, this is so very, very nice of the board. Steve, you were a great friend to Sam. Everyone on the board was a great friend to Sam. I feel like I've known almost every single registrar since he trained, it seemed like, every single registrar preceding you. And I'm trying my best to take over and fill his shoes, which, as you can hear, is a virtual impossibility. He was just a great man, a great friend. I've come to know him, obviously, and I know his family. Both Debbie and Mike work for our office and have for years, and I've become very close with them. And I want to thank you all, again, very, very much for taking the time out of this particular meeting and paying tribute to him. Thank you again.
I'll make this real quick. This meant a lot to me and the family, mostly because you guys meant so much to my dad. He truly loved the board and the industry, and I think that's why he loved his work so much, was because he loved you guys. So I just thank you from all of us.
Well, to close, I want to thank all the speakers who I think did an excellent job, but I really want to thank the family and Bruce and Ken for coming. It's an honor to have you. It's an honor to be able to do this. I want to thank you for allowing us to remember Sam in this way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll move to agenda item D, and this is the public comment section. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the board cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on an item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual. Is there any member of the public wishing to address the board at this time? Please come up to the dais and turn the microphone on. If you'd introduce yourself, please.
Right here. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, my name is Gal Bigeleisen. I represent RMO Agency, and we've been arguing the entire way who was going to come up and speak in front of all of you. Sure, of course. RMO Agency, we basically introduce qualifiers or RMOs to new contractors. When the company first opened in 2006, it was myself as well as the owner. We basically did everything, all the marketing, the personal introductions. We've had clients who've been licensed contractors with us since 2007. And we basically help them if it's a language barrier that they have and they couldn't pass the exam. They worked for another company and now they're getting their experience until they can qualify their own license. We assist them with starting their way, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
For those that don't know what RMO stands for, would you please?
Sure, license qualifiers. Every company that operates with a license needs to have a license qualifier, and we basically introduce those qualifiers to new contractors. Is that clear? Okay. So as I mentioned, when we first started, I was the one dealing with all aspects of the business. As we've grown, as we've expanded, now we have more staff to educate of all the regulations that are in place, all the expectations, and as well as our clients. We really strive to educate our clients of what the requirements are, if it's the requirements of qualifying or the of being new contractors. So for the last year and a half, we've been working diligently on creating we call it a supervision plan, and it's a list of guidelines that's based on your guidelines and regulation on how an RMO needs to be involved in the day-to-day operations of each of the contractors. We introduce this supervision plan to every client, if it's an RMO or a contractor that steps our way and wants to use our services. And we turn away people who wouldn't do it. We just do not want to be associated with someone that the board will not see fit as being a licensed contractor. Now, where our challenge is, and that is my question or request to you, we use public records to find out if someone has a personal criminal record, anything that we can find, if it's been verified or unlimited background check. I can guarantee that the information we have is not as accurate as the information that you have. So we have turned on individuals on an application that probably shouldn't qualify. With the background checks that we've done, and they seem to be clear in all aspects, and then something comes either that they've had an issue with the license that wasn't presented in the public arena, or something else that may have been expunged that we didn't have access to. We have not been able to pre-qualify every single person that steps our way and just make an accurate decision whether this person should be licensed or not. I've done my personal research as to how can a person do their own background check if I were to go and get fingerprinted, and I would only be able to get a response from the Department of Justice, not the FBI and not any of the sources that you have internally. My question is, how can a person really know if they will pre-qualify or if the Contractors Board will approve them without going through all the background checks before starting the entire process? My idea, and I understand that from an idea to actually creating it and executing it is a whole long process, was to create an application just very similar to the applications we already have in place to add a classification, to replace a qualifier, just an application for a background clearance. It would only go through the criminal background unit, and then a person would really know whether or not they can and they will be approved by the board. I'm sure that people would be willing to pay a certain fee just like they do for any other application, and it would really help know in advance rather than spending all the time and energy through the entire process and then at the end of the process find out that this certain individual will not qualify. I'm not expecting an answer right now. It's just an idea that I wanted to address because really we certainly want to make sure that we bring quality people to be licensed, and we can't do it not having all the information in place. So I thank you for listening, and I would really appreciate if we could work together on something that works so we can bring to the table quality contractors that will be in it for the long run.
Are there any board members or staff that wish to address this at this time? If not, thank you. We'll take this under consideration.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public wishing to address the board? Yes.
My name is Joe Lopez. I run a company called Craftsmanship Carpentry. I have a misconduct situation that I want to talk to the board about. It has to do with people in the Contractor State Board. So I don't know if you guys want to address that now or some other time.
I think what we'll have you do is, if you wouldn't mind, maybe address it with our Chief of Enforcement, Dave Fote, and if you want to step outside in the hallway, you
Okay.
can talk to him about it. And,
All right, thank you.
We ask Steve to come back in, please. David. All right, we'll just move forward. Anyone else from the public wishing to address the board at this time? Would you state your name for the board?
Yes, I will. It's Steve Latonin with IAPMO. And I just happen to think I would
Can
be...
you tell us what IAPMO is?
Oh, I'm sorry. We just assume. IAPMO is the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. We're the publisher of the Uniform Plumbing Code, Uniform Mechanical Code, Uniform Solar Energy Code, and the Pool and Spa Code, as well as being a product tester and certifier and an education source. So I felt I would be remiss if I didn't take the time to congratulate you on the excellence of your preparation for your board meeting. You know, I think this is my first board meeting since 2009, so I haven't been participating as much as certainly as I used to in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. But I have to tell you, this board packet that was sent to me is really exceptional. It's, you know, I said it's 159 pages electronically at least, and I went through just about all of it, and having 30 years of experience with the license board, I was really impressed. So I just wanted to say congratulations to the staff and to the board for the work you're doing.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
That is really appreciated by, on behalf of, if it's okay to say, on behalf of the staff, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the staff, and they really deserve the kudos. Each of our 4 divisions, they worked so hard to put this together, and I know you've been around for a very long time with this board, and thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the board at this time? All right. Do any board members have comments regarding the minutes? Excuse me. I forgot to move us to the agenda item E, which is the review and approval of the September 6th, 2013 board meeting minutes. That's agenda item E. Any board members with comments on this agenda item?
I'd like to make a motion there approved as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes September 6, 2013. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Agenda item F is the Enforcement Committee report. Ed Lang and Dave Fote will give us an Enforcement Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you may recall, a year ago, when we met here in Norwalk, we had staff present at the meeting voicing their concern with current conditions of CSLB vehicles. Staff mentioned how the cars were constantly breaking down and in need of constant repairs. I am pleased to announce today that all 25 new vehicles have been delivered to enforcement offices around the state. Let's give a round of applause for that one. I have spoken with staff, and they are all very excited to have received the vehicles and commented on how energy efficient they are. We would like to thank the Agency Secretary Anna Caballari and DCA Director Denise Brown for all their support and assistance for securing the purchase of the vehicles. I've also recently had the opportunity to speak with some of the peace officers. They mentioned to me how much they enjoyed their bi-monthly meeting chaired by David Folk, where they're able to discuss current cases and any issues that they may be facing. They're also excited about the part of DCA structured defensive tactics training for police officers, police peace officers. The training conducted last month included training by 2 of our peace officers. They find their training very beneficial in helping them perform their job duties. One of the peace officers shared his experience with the Goslan case, and another provided detailed instruction on conducting elder abuse investigation. Most of the principles of the Goslan case have played out. However, the main principle, Ava Goslan, is still pending as new victims continue to come forward. Cases like the Gosling case are helping to change the way CSLB peace officers are used in the enforcement division. It allows the peace officers to become experts in their types of specialized investigation and to work more effectively with our law enforcement partners and the district attorney's offices. Let me direct you to now F1 in your packet. The Enforcement Committee summary report for the October 21st, 2013 Enforcement Committee meeting is included, as you probably have read it already. Do any of the board members have any comments regarding the minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, hearing and seeing none. At this point, I move that and approve for approval of the October 21st Enforcement Committee meeting summary. Chair. Okay, thank you. The minutes of October 21st committee meeting has been approved. Agenda item F2, enforcement program update. Before we begin the enforcement update program, we are pleased to have today a representative from Riverside County District Attorney's Office. Riverside County has taken a lead role in prosecuting elder abuse cases and construction-related criminal offenses. Senior Deputy District Attorney Elsie Farrell has been a long-time partner of CSLB and is in attendance today. Ms. Farrell is dedicated to the safety of consumers and has been instrumental in the persecution of unscrupulous contractors committing construction fraud in Riverside County. Also, we have with us today Deputy District Attorney Human Husseinian, who has had an opportunity to work closely with CSLB investigators. Ms. Farrell and Mr. Husseinian has presented various training to CSLB investigators. They have provided training on performing criminal investigations, testifying to hearsay evidence, which is very helpful when investigating elder abuse, and drafting affidavits in support of search warrants to over 100 enforcement representatives. David will discuss a few of the Riverside County highlights included in the packet, but I want to specifically mention Hunan and Husseinian fine work on the Christopher Heiser prosecution. Revoked licensee Christopher Heiser was contracted to build 2 homes in La Quinta for approximately $2.5 million each. After 2 complaints were filed, the CSLB investigator determined that Heiser forced the signature of one of the homeowners on construction loan documents and illegally obtained hundreds of thousands of dollars from the mortgage company. Based on the completed CSLB investigation, Mr. Husseinian filed criminal charges against Heiser for 42 counts of forgery, corruption of records, 2 counts of grand theft, 1 count of using the personal identification of another, and 1 count of unlicensed business transaction. In a negotiated plea bargain, Heiser pleaded guilty to 3 of the charges, including 2 felonies. Heiser was sentenced to serve 2 years in state prison and 180 days in county jail, with the sentences to run concurrently. He was also ordered to pay $652,697 in victim restitution. At this time, I will ask the board chair, John Hancock, Registrar Steve Sand, and Enforcement Chair, the Enforcement Division Chair, Chief Dave Folk, to join me in recognizing Elise Farrell and Human Husseinian. Please come forward, please.
Facing Rick.
I just wanted to publicly acknowledge Dave Fote because we work with a lot of boards and bureaus in our office, and sometimes that can be challenging. Not so much with Dave. Dave always gives us the support we need. We love going out to train his people because we know that he really wants to better, his enforcement. He's constantly trying to better, the enforcement representatives and how they can work with us. And, we just so much appreciate our working relationship with CSLB. So I just wanted to acknowledge Dave for that because he's really a gem in the rough. So.
At this point, David Fote, Chief of Enforcement, will now provide enforcement program update.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. If we could turn to F2, just like to provide an update on what we're doing in our intake mediation centers. We're continuing to focus on resolving. Sorry, we'll just get you closer. Okay. Resolving our complaints within 60 days of receipt. And you'll see our impressive settlement statistics of $10 million since July of 2012. At the next meeting, we'll provide our settlement restitution statistics for calendar year 2013, which we're working on now for our accomplishment report. A couple new things, though, at the intake mediation centers. We've reclassified 2 consumer service representative positions to ER positions, to enforcement rep, and they're now issuing citations. They're issuing citations for violating the dig requirement or the dig alert requirement, where you have to call to make sure you're not going to hit a power line. Also, they're focusing on permit violations. So we're warning these contractors they need to get a permit. When we receive an industry complaint or a consumer complaint for failure to obtain a permit, the staff in the intake mediation centers are issuing approximately 4 citations a month, and we're really hoping that's going to change the culture where we're going to gain additional compliance. As far as some of the highlights, we have a couple of significant settlements that we were able to achieve for deployed personnel, which we're very happy about. We also have 2 highlights on page 2 relating to the solar industry. And you'll see, as pointed out earlier by Board Member Kevin Albanese, the settlement for the solar settlement of $1.8 million was quite significant, one of the largest we've ever had. And that was a new home builder that stepped up to make the solar panels, to make the solar systems that were installed compliant with industry standards. So we very much appreciate that cooperation by that home builder. We are keeping a close look on solar companies that are entering into lease agreements with property owners, subcontracting the work to unlicensed contractors. The problem is the solar companies are entering to the lease agreements are not licensed, and they're required to be licensed. On page 3, we have our settlement statistics relating, again, to the handling of the licensee complaints, getting them disposition within 60 days. We're substantially hitting the board goal of 70%. We're at 68%, and 41% of the cases settled with restitution to consumers, which exceeds the board's goal of 30%. If we move to page 4, we have on the top of the page our restitution statistics for our investigative centers, coming in around $4 million. We still focus on making parties whole when possible with our field investigations. The idea being we can make a consumer whole and we can help a contractor correct a deficient business practice. At the top of the page, I wanted to highlight what we're seeing a trend on, and that's where we have contractors that are soliciting for work to come out and tune up a heater, do an inspection. They're getting consumers to pay money for them to come into their house, when the intent really is to enter into a contract that's grossly exceeds the market value of the work. It's a high-pressure sale. They're targeting the elderly and other disadvantaged communities. And what we've done is we've had meetings with our peace officers to explore ways where we can address this phenomenon. And at this point, I would ask one of our peace officers, Deidre Green, to step up and talk about her background coming from outside the Contractors Board, how she's been able to learn the tools that are necessary to be effective with investigations of the Contractors Board. And maybe not without, we don't want to jeopardize any of your cases, but if you could talk about some of the trends or the complaints that you have seen or currently working on that deal with elder abuse, or really a misrepresentation of the work that needs to be done. So thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Deidre Green. I've been with the Contractors Board as a peace officer, as a sworn peace officer, approximately 1 year. I have 13 years in law enforcement, 6 years as a parole agent for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Also, I worked in Tehachapi State Prison as a superintendent of fabric products. So that kind of rounds out my 13 years of law enforcement experience. Now, the peace officer position within the investigative units is a relatively new position. And through that, I've actually helped my colleagues in serving search warrants, and I've also helped them in gathering information for criminal filings. Our mission, basically, as Mr. Foe has mentioned, is to go into advanced elder abuse complaints as well as workers' comp. Now, but that's kind of evolved into even more, and to build relationships with other law enforcement agencies via our tactical training that we recently received. I interface with other investigators from the Division of Investigations regarding how they're handling some of their complex investigations. I've also attend monthly meetings with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, the Real Estate Task Force meeting, in which one of the members has contacted me regarding a non-licensed contractor that was arrested, and he needed my assistance in the appropriate BMP codes for criminal filing. Now, this is an interesting one. I have training recently with the Los Angeles Joint Regional Intelligence Center for Orange County as well as Los Angeles County. Now, that advanced internet training has basically showed me, as well as another colleague, how to gather intelligence regarding locating suspects via social media, networking, and other websites that are out there. And right now I'm working with my supervisor in passing that along to the other law enforcement, to the other enforcement representatives, so they can too gain from that advanced internet intelligence gathering. Also, through the LA County Elder Abuse Symposium, I worked with a probate judge who also needed my assistance for one of her neighbors who fell prey to a non-licensed contractor. And so basically the trends that Dave is talking about, there's ways that I'm uncovering the ways just from I have a lot of elder abuse cases that I have right now, and I'm just kind of gathering up the facts, and I'm working with some other experienced enforcement representatives to kind of keep a track of these trends. Even though I'm getting leads from people that want to remain confidential, I'm still kind of gathering them up and putting them into a folder so that I can collectively gather things together and then identify who these the contractors are that are preying upon our elders. Through this type of networking, agencies, this is what I have found, agencies are not only becoming aware that CSLB does have peace officers, that they're actually beginning to contact me with as a viable resource in order to protect the public. Thank you.
They may have a question for you.
Okay.
I have a question. Hi, I'm one of the board members. And, I really commend you on the work that you're doing, because I know that elder fraud abuse is definitely on the radar screen, and there'll be more and more in that area. My question is basically working with some of the district attorney's offices that you probably come in contact with. Do each of them have a separate elder fraud unit just specializing in that area?
Well, I know the Los Angeles County DA office has a special elder abuse unit. It's kind of under the economic crimes. Their threshold for reporting, I actually did meet with the senior investigating supervisor Ms. Squires, about a month ago, and their threshold is $100,000, but I did, or multiple victims that collectively come to $100,000. But I'm also, this is just the beginning. I'm going to try to see, because I have different cases that might have 5 victims. Maybe the amount is not $100,000. So I think as I just begin to go to these meetings and develop these relationships, maybe that I can show them, hey, this is worth taking. Look at this trend.
Most DA's offices, almost all of them, have elder abuse units. We do not have any threshold, a monetary threshold in our office, as I believe most offices don't, because elder abuse is elder abuse. So in terms of the punishment for it, obviously you can ratchet it up depending on how much the individual case, the loss is. But in terms of filing cases or investigating cases, we don't have a threshold for that, and most offices don't.
We're glad as a board to hear that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, we can turn to page 6. Statistics I received from the middle of the page, we are currently right at a threshold of the amount of cases that we can handle, which is approximately 3,010. We've included our board objectives as far as reduction in cycle times. We did hit a record low last month of only having 54 cases statewide that exceeded 9 months in age. Really attests to staff's commitment to identifying the egregious offenders and taking actions timely. On page 7, I ran into Nora Uriah. She's with us today, and she hadn't seen the photo. So Nora, have you seen the photo in the packet now? Okay, so thank you. Just want to make sure. Yeah, that's it. That's her. She represents the investigators out in the field, for sure. If we could turn to page 15, skip ahead a bit. I am not sure what the total fleet is right now. I'll give an estimate that it's somewhere between 45 and 50. And it's right where we need to be, but we do have additional cars that exceed 120,000 miles that will need to be replaced next year. If Adriana Moran is with us today, I don't know if she had a chance to see the board that she has up in Norwalk, where she really leads the way in making sure that we're achieving general services usage requirements, because that's the key. Cars are shared by our staff. And on average, it's 2 to 3 of our investigators sharing one vehicle. So it's critical that they have a reliable car. But the 25 new vehicles made a significant improvement. It helped immensely. We don't need near that many cars next year. I believe we very much appreciate the board's support. It really played a vital role in making this happen. We're confident, though, that if we can Okay, sorry. On pages 12 through 15, we have a summary of the training that staff have been provided. As you'll see, it's extensive. Where we're going in January, though, is we've established a new module, and it's specific for our supervisors. And we're real excited about this. Unfortunately, is Christina Delt back in the room? You might want to just stand up. As most of you know, she was selected as the Deputy Chief of Enforcement. She brings a strong background at administrative and personnel issues, and she'll be taking a lead role and providing direction to the supervisors on how they can work with their staff and identifying their training needs, if they have any deficiencies, where they need to improve, just really providing them the feedback out in the field offices that they've asked for. So we're real excited about the latest module that rolls out in January. The Riverside County cases, and we have a lot of cases that we can highlight and that we do highlight on a weekly basis, either through Steve Sands' report or through the report I send out to the field staff. But I thought these really stood out, and it really exemplifies the fine work that our partners at the Riverside DA's office perform. And you look at the first one, it's Alfredo Guerrero. He had a verbal contract. He's unlicensed. He forced his way into the consumer's home. He was met by the consumer at gunpoint. It became a police matter. But you can see how these cases, they can escalate. It can be a tremendous problem. And if you look at the settlement of that case, it was 80 days in jail, which is very impressive. Again, and restitution to the victim in the amount of $13,000 and $2,800 returned to CSLB. So you don't see this in every area, but you do when you have prosecutors such as Human and Elise that understand the need to work these cases and how important they are to the consumers that have been victimized. We also have Vaki Tupo, and he, again, is unlicensed. He had an ankle bracelet. It appears when they removed the ankle bracelet, he went right back to his criminal activities, victimized more consumers, using day laborers, doesn't have workers' comp. I believe this was the case that was worked by our peace officer in San Bernardino, John Anderson. I don't have an update on what's happening with it, but was very glad to see that he's been charged with the unlicensed practice, the fraudulent use of a license number, which can be charged as a felony, also for employing workers without violations, and I guess finally, which is interesting, violation of probation. So all that is pending. And the last one I wanted to highlight is Edgar Torres, another non-licensee, took $62,000 for retaining wall, room addition, did minimal work or less than half the work. Within 3 months, he'd obtained $61,000. These consumers did not lack the funds to hire another contractor to do the work, so they're having to do it themselves with family and friends. And he was charged with diversion of construction funds, unlicensed practice, sentenced to 270 days in county jail with 36 months probation. So those are some excellent cases performed by the Riverside DA. And just the final thing I would mention about them, they've been pioneers when it's a licensed contractor. We don't send as many of those type of criminal cases relating to licensees, or perhaps we should, but when they do have one, they've been aggressive in revoking the license from the bench, which is so effective, so we don't have to go through the lengthy administrative hearing process. So thank you, Elise. Thank you, Human. And that would conclude my update.
Thank you, David, for providing that update. Is there any public comment on this item at this time? What about board members? If not, let's go to item F3.
Okay, we were at the last board meeting, the board had asked the staff to seek a AG opinion on electrical certification. We have not received anything from the AG's office yet. We did find subsequently that DIR, Division of Industrial Relations, is looking for an opinion regarding it. So we've been trying to get them to do that for years. So this thing might be taken care of for us by DIR. As soon as we hear something, we'll let the board know, but we don't know anything as of now. Rick, you ready? With the chair's indulgence, I'm going to be doing a special agenda item. Before I joined the Architects Board, and our legal counsel was Don Chang. Don likes to say that was the beginning of a strange and wonderful relationship, he being the wonderful one. So I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of look back at Don and mine's relationship. Don has been promoted a while ago to being supervising attorney, so he's got a lot of responsibility. So we were able to get Kurt Hepler to be taken over. Some big shoes to fill. So you just, it's not on.
This is the down arrow once.
So, as you know, I love movies, and Don and my life together was kind of like a movie script or a series of movies. There you see, we did strike back. That's Don's actual hair there. And he was a superhero in the legal office, let me tell you. Mr. Sands, I don't think we're in Kansas. Indeed, we weren't. Now, year one, we started off. How come I have a beard and Don doesn't? Yeah. You can read it. Said, this is where it all began in 1986, when hair was dark and glasses were big, really big. I don't know if you can see those things. That's me in the lower left, that skinny, dark-haired guy. And we were known as the A-Team. Now, a couple of Don's closest friends were Dan Buncher and Bob Miller, other attorneys. I think they all came in about the same time. They were fast friends forever. And Don just was a superhero as far as we're concerned. Whether he was suave as 007, Batman and Robin saving the department, or using his superior intellect as Mr. Spock. Now, this is when we were at the Architects Board. That's Lynn Morris, the executive officer. It looks like she's napping. And as Don says, why did she get to sleep? And I have to listen to this. Thank goodness I look good in these glasses, in this three-piece suit. Remember, who's the broadcaster for the Cubs? Doesn't he those look like Harry Carey's glasses there? And Don and I had fun. We tried to have as much fun as possible. And these were Don's closest friends, Dan Buncher and Bob Miller. And Don thinks we're his amigos. Well, indeed they were. They were the three amigos. Now, this is Senator Liz Figueroa. Liz. Speaking to the board. There's Don, trying not to nod off. But Don, what he loves to do in his spare time is fish. And there he is, up in Alaska. Whoops. This one's a throwback. You should have seen the one that got away. Right. Steve told me I'd get a badge if I sit through one more board meeting. Laura was so shocked to hear that Dawn was thinking that. Looks like she's having a heart attack there. Madam Chair, I can't believe after working 29 years with Steve Sands, all I get is a hall pass. Well, Dawn, there's your hall pass. That is not my real hair. Now, these are Don. This is the core group of the legal office. So Dan Buncher, Anita Scurry, Don Chag, and Bob Miller. Don's the only one who hasn't retired yet. So by hanging around, he became the supervising attorney because he was the last man standing. And he loves working with the board. That's the Norwalk staff behind him. Working with CSLB has been a barrel of laughs. And this is our former chief deputy registrar, or now director, and Don's thinking, I bet CSLB chief deputy registrar will be the peak of Denise Brown's career. He said that before she was appointed as director. And Don and I were so close sometimes we felt like we were stepbrothers. I like that hair on Don. I like Don's hair. Those glasses aren't big enough, though. But Don did feel close. He said, I'm telling Steve Sands was mean to me, but he's still the best stepbrother ever. That's what Don thought. Sorry, I can't say the same. Oh, did I say that out loud? Looks like who picked that picture? Rick, looks like I'm picking my nose there. Thanks. This is a committee meeting where Don's asking Bob, are we still going to go for a ride on your Harley after the meeting? Since when did strategic planning include learning the Macarena? I actually have my right foot off the ground there. Pastor is trying to teach us, and it's just not working. Karen's just not buying it for 1 minute. I'm trying, though. And looks like Lisa's poking Ed in the eye there. I don't know. Look at the look on Don's face. I wonder what he's thinking. Yeah. Amy's crazy. There's no way the internet is going to catch on. But I have to say, after all these years, I really do love Don. He's been such a dear friend to me, and I just want to tell you, I love you, man. So now, as we see him move on, he'll be hanging out with his best friend. And we wish him well in his travels, as he says, finally cutting the CSLB ties. Not if I can help it, but I think I've run out of options. So with that, Don, thank you so much. That will be playing on the website in perpetuity.
Thank you. I got this classic picture of Steve when the time is right. He looks like a Miami Vice.
With that presentation, are there any rebuttals? Madam Chair, this ends our report.
All right, thank you. Agenda item G is the Public Affairs Committee report. Rick Lopes and Pastor Herrera Jr. will give us the Public Affairs Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that's going to be a tough act to follow. Well, no wonder you're getting all these new video toys. You know, the film industry, good for you. Anyway, I'll be brief, and Rick can really highlight you on the more details here, but I just wanted to point out a couple of the things on the report. One is the staffing. They continue with the full staff, and one good item is they're bringing in a student assistant soon, which will be a great help to the unit. Also, for your information, there was a report on the revised intranet, which is the website that is for the internal website for employees, and which gives them an opportunity to have some information privy to the board, forms, employee information, photos, new employees, etc. And one thing of note is that they do have bios about us, the board members, on that. So I'm glad to see that they know who we are. Rick, thank you. The following thing, talking about websites, they are also working on revising and launching a new website, probably in the spring of 2014. And basically, you know, new websites are surfacing all over for many businesses and organizations, basically for adaptability to the smartphones and tablets, which is something that's kind of moving in that direction as far as technology, and congratulations that you're doing that. There's also a section on the social media and electronic equipment, the new tools that the board has acquired, which Rick would tell you more about. One thing, of course, is the YouTube videos that they're able to create. I've seen some of them on their website, which I think are very good. An excellent form to get the word out, to educate the public, and to educate the community as to what's going on at the Contractors State License Board. Also included in the section of the report is the article by NASCLA, the national organization, and they feature the Contractor State License Board in that issue. It's a very interesting, very positive report on the board. Congratulations, Steve, for your involvement with them and your staff. And lastly, I just wanted to mention the Senior Scam Stoppers. Early in January, they're going to be hosting or having the 300th workshop in Salinas. That's going to be sponsored by Assemblyman Alejo, and also the Secretary Ana Caballero will be there at that time. And hopefully you'll have another clip there, Steve, to kind of show. Yeah, that'd be a good YouTube presentation to have on your files. And I'll let Rick kind of take it from there.
Thanks, Pastor. Actually, you've done a good job. So I will just touch on a few things and be happy to answer any questions that the board members have. As far as one of the main reasons why we did our new intranet site, which is the employee-only internal site. It's not accessible at all by the general public, but it's to basically take the information that we've got that is of use to our employees and trying to clean up just how we enable them to get their hands on it. Our old intranet site kind of turned into a big closet, and things just kept getting put in there, and there was really no order to it, and it was very difficult to find. So our staff, especially Rose Avila, our graphic designer who did the entire layout and did a lot of the HTML coding, she went through and actually reorganized everything, gave it a purpose, gave it a place, and hopefully, and we've gotten good feedback so far, it's made it much easier for our staff to find the reports and the forms and the various things that they need in their doing their day-to-day activities. And we've also supplemented some things like our staff phone list. We now include pictures so people can actually see staff members, which has been very useful. Let's say we have somebody here in Norwalk dealing with somebody in Sacramento. They may never have been to the Sacramento headquarters. They can actually put a face to a name and actually see who they've been talking with for so many months or years. We're also able to do an ongoing, almost like a blog, to let employees know what is happening within the board. In the past, we used to do a quarterly newsletter for employees, and now we're updating that on the fly as things happen. We'll write stories, post pictures. Employees can also submit pictures for posting, and we're hoping that will build over time, and we can post things very quickly. So that's, we think, a nice feature for employees as well. On page 2, with the website redesign, as Pastor mentioned, we're hoping to be able to launch by spring of 2014. Our information technology team is really taking a lead, and a lot of the work is being done by them at this point because a lot of it is technical and rebuilding pages. And as Pastor said, it's not just a look and feel of the site. We're trying to help with navigation and things like that, but it really is going to be great for people looking at our site on their mobile phones, on their iPads, any kind of tablets. It's going to be optimized so it can work on any number of different computers and tablets. The nice thing about that is right now our mobile website is very limited. We only offer about 3 or 4, maybe half dozen different options. Now the entire website is going to be. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. We hope to launch this spring, but it's going to be a great advancement, and we'll be one of the first state agencies to switch over to this new format. At the bottom of page 2 and 3, this is the application instruction video, which we've talked about in a number of meetings. It continues to get views. It hasn't done as much as we were hoping as far as being able to bring down the percentage of rejections that we get on the original applications. If you may remember, is the original rejections, many times it happens because an applicant has not signed the form. They've done something wrong with their name style. So it's not that they're getting rejected for getting a license. They've just made a mistake on the application itself. So we created a video that takes you through step by step each part of the application, hoping that would cut down. And as you can see as on the graph on page 3, the numbers are kind of bouncing around, and we're not sure if there's other things that are contributing to this or what the correlation is. It's obviously impossible for us to tell if the people seeing the video are actually doing the application. So the numbers are what they are right now, and we hope that over time those numbers will come down. Bottom of page 3, you see the social media. information and on to page 4 as well. It's very interesting. We're starting to be able to get a lot of statistics and finding out where people are from. It's interesting that we, statistically, most of our Facebook fans are here in the Los Angeles area. We can tell, ages and things like that. We can also, I know we have a handful of people who are Facebook fans overseas, and we thought that's kind of interesting. On page 5 is the email statistics. Those, continually grow. Not really a lot to highlight there. Growth continues. On page 6, I'll draw your attention to the media event that we did in Salinas on October the 14th. This was to announce the results of our Fall California Blitz, and we conducted the news conference in conjunction with the Monterey County District Attorney's Office. And as you can see with the pictures and the information there, is our board chair, Joan Hancock, did join us for that press conference, as well as our agency secretary, Ana Caballero, who was a former mayor of Salinas and has a lot of connections in that area. And it was great because the day before we actually had her out, and she got to spend a couple hours behind the scenes at the sting operation and see how it runs. She got some firsthand contact with our enforcement staff and seeing how they run the sting, and I think she did come away very impressed on just how the operation ran, and she spoke very highly of us during the media interviews the next day. And as Pastor mentioned, in our senior scam stopper, she'll be joining us for our 300th next month. On page 7 is our news releases since our last board meeting. You'll notice at the bottom we've also conducted media training. We did sessions for our enforcement staff in Fresno, Sacramento, and Norwalk for SWIFT, and we'll be looking at other enforcement staff to be able to target them for future training sessions. Since our last board meeting, we did issue another California licensed contractor newsletter. This is the online version. 3 times a year this is online. 1 time a year we do print it out. Pastor also mentioned the NASCA articles. And then on page 9, the video production, you can see here in the room we do have our new video production equipment has been delivered. We are using it. Not only are we able to do all of our board and committee meetings now, which in the past we were not able to stream committee meetings. We do our live stream of the committee meetings. We're also, since we have our own equipment now, we're able to go beyond just meetings. For example, last week our licensing division conducted a training session for licensing schools around the state, and we had probably 25 or so people joining us in Sacramento for it, but we had 3 times as many actually watched online as we did the live stream of this training seminar, and we've gotten some good feedback. I'm sure Karen, if she can, will talk more about it in her presentation. But that just gives us opportunities to do things well above and beyond, and we'll be looking to do other kinds of video productions, not only creating videos, but also these live interactive presentations that we can do not only with the schools, but certainly with the industry and with our licensees. On page 10, you see the publication updates for the last couple of months. On to page 11 with the senior scam stoppers, as I mentioned, and our kudos to Jane Kreidler from our staff, who is a tireless worker and a tireless traveler. She realizes she does get to keep her frequent flyer miles because she's up and down the state pretty close to every week now. And again, we're going to hit our 300th next month. And I also do want to bring to your attention on page 13, we went ahead and listed for you, and our thanks
Excuse me, did you say 300 for the year?
No, not for the year. No, I believe that we're doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 this year. So, yes, there's certainly more than one a week.
So since she started.
Yeah, so 300 in the whole time since, I believe, the late 90s. But we quickly went, it took us a while to build up to...
I was a little worried about Jane there.
Yeah, it took us a while to build up to 100, a little quicker to 200, and we've just really scooted very quickly and hit now 300.
Congratulations.
And then you see on page 13, and our thanks to the board members who were able to join this. It's just a great opportunity to kind of to be able to be in front of consumers talking about our messages, and also the various legislators who we do partner with. So thank you to Pastor, to Matt, and to Kevin for joining us. And we'd encourage any other board members to join us at any time. We're more than happy to have you join us. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Rick. Are there any comments from the board or the public concerning this item? Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Pastor and Rick. Agenda item H is the Legislative Committee report, and Paul Schifino and Laura Zuniga will provide this report.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pastor, I want to thank you for attending 13 seminars. I find that quite humbling.
Chair of the Public Affairs Committee.
Well, it's
Take mine.
It's definitely,
Yeah,
definitely good work. So on with the ledge report, which, as usual, is the most exciting of matters to go over. So everybody hang on to the edge of your seats. We have the minutes from our meeting on November 18th that are going to be, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve. As a brief summary for what we are asking you to approve, under item D, which is on page 2, you have number 1, which is section 7011.4, which is the yellow page attached at the back of the section. And that's just a brief correction of a law that in 7011.4 that seemingly required, the way it was previously drafted, for the CSLB to set up a separate enforcement division for the purposes of being able to write up notices to appear in court. And so it's just a correction to strike some language and fix it so that the current enforcement division has the authority to issue the written notices to appear. That's the first item. The second item, well, are there any questions from the board or the public on that item? The second item is 7027.2. Now that item addresses the fact that unlicensed handymen, handy people, who do work up to $500, which is legal, have to include on their website the language that they are not licensed. But what we need to do, what we're doing is we're adding the language that they can only do work up to $500 because those current websites, it appears that they could do anything they want. These websites have advertisements to remodel bathrooms, rebuild kitchens, things well over $500. So we're adding in the language to say only up to $500. No problem there. We want to do a minor tweak to it, which is not written in here right now, which is we want to put that on the first page. We want to have it prominently displayed. So what we're asking right now is for staff to work on putting together a slight modification so that this under $500 limit is prominently displayed on the website. So what we're asking is for the board to approve my approval of the staff's recommendations on how to display that. So that's item 2. Any questions on that? Please, Frank.
We have this $500 limit, and I understand that. And you know, when I was reading this over before the meeting, it occurred to me: suppose that the handyman comes to a point where there's a change in the work and it exceeds his $500 amount. Where are we going with that? I mean, if you legally basically engage this contract for, let's say, $450, and now there's a $200 change order to that, where does that fall within?
So if through change orders it exceeds that amount. That's beyond the scope of what we're trying to approve here, but it's a great question that I'm sure someone here can answer other than me and staff, or Don?
Basically, the law limits them to like the aggregate price, the aggregate contract price. So if it's $450, and then they find there's another $250 value of work that needs to be done, the aggregate value is more than $500, and they suddenly have stepped over the line and it's now engaged in unlicensed activity.
It kind of occurred to me when I was thinking about this that you know, there's a progress of some work going on, something, you know, whatever. And all of a sudden there's a change, but now the work is already opened and it's you're underway. So where does that lead? You know, you see what I'm saying? There seems to be a little bit of a difficulty in that if inadvertently something was concealed that either homeowner or the contractor or handyman in this case could see, and they came across something that needed to be corrected in the course of the work. Now the work is open. It's almost like the handyman would have to abandon the work.
I have a question. Well, is it possible that it would become a new project with its, I mean, if it was, you know, different in scope?
You really can't do that, because otherwise, if you start allowing them to do new projects, you have unlicensed people basically breaking down, projects into multiple projects. And this is not really a change in the law. This is existing law.
Okay, it
No.
just becomes,
So keep in mind, what we're talking about now is just how we want an unlicensed contractor to inform the public on the website of the $500 limit. That's really all this is about. Please state your name if you don't mind.
Richard Markison, and representing electricians, plumbers, and sheet metal, and I think we strongly support your change, but I'm not sure if the language that's in the handout really accomplishes that, and I would suggest that perhaps you consider that in that last sentence states in the advertisement that he or she is not licensed under this chapter and the value of the project may not exceed $500. I think that in its current syntax, and I'm sure Don would probably be able to give you a better reading on that, that may not necessarily accomplish what it is that you're trying to do and may, again, be somewhat ambiguous. Thank you.
And that is an appropriate comment, and we were going to take that up with staff with regard to that edit.
Mr. Vermeulen, please. No, it does not. So what you're proposing is that the value of labor and materials, that would exclude equipment
Cannot
rentals.
exceed $500.
But that would exclude equipment rentals and other items. I think the value of the work is more all-encompassing. But what I would suggest is that we view that as a staff issue to see if we can just clarify the language.
We can do that as a staff issue, and what we would do is we would make the disclaimer be consistent with the current law, which
Right.
talks about the aggregate value.
Okay.
I think we're trying to get to the same goal, and I agree with I think the comment's well-founded. When it says the work versus value of the project, there might be some tweaking in there that we can do in the language. I agree.
The other thing that kind of is a bugaboo, bothers me a lot, is the fact that the handyman exemption up to $500. But if I'm a licensed contractor and go out to do something that I'm not licensed for, that's $500 or less, I'm going to be cited. So yeah, you're out of classification. So then 7031 kicks in. So then the whole job, you lose the whole job of all the money that's been paid to you. It's absurd. So on the one side, we're in essence saying go ahead and go forward with the $500 handyman exemption, but we're nailing the good guy for doing something minor under $500. There's an inconsistency there.
I think it's a valid statement, but back to what we're looking at now is a small issue that is really just
Well,
a
it's something,
disclosure.
yeah, and I understand, Paul, but it's something we should be thinking about. I mean, I've been harping on this for a long time at the 7031, as you have too, Paul.
It's a valid point. Are there any other questions from the public or the board?
Are we also including the discussion here about, let's see, sorry, hold on for a second. They have to state that they're not licensed. Is that something we're adding in addition to the existing language?
That's currently in the language.
Yeah.
That's already required.
Okay, but I guess what I was wondering where that needs to come on, say, a business card or any kind of advertising that's done. Is it buried in a disclaimer, or, I mean, is it going to be something that's required directly under the person's name? For general contractors, our licenses, I believe, come directly after our names or company name.
So that's a good question. That's one of the issues that Paul was talking about earlier that we'll kind of further refine the proposal to address that. I've been talking to legislative committee staff, and we talked about suggesting that it's prominently displayed or display it in the same font size that the contact information for the person is, to make sure that it's not buried and the consumer can see the information. So we'll work on it a little bit further.
And I think my question for you, Chair, would be, if you would prefer, would a motion be acceptable to allow me to work with staff to approve that language, or would we rather come back for a separate motion in front of the board once we already have that language? Steve, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I think in this case, you want to make it as flexible as possible, so we don't have to wait and come back to the board. We typically would ask the board to approve a proposal in concept, realizing that when you get an author, it becomes your author's property, so to speak, and they can, it becomes subject to change by the committee consultant or whatever. So it's an ongoing process. For right now, we're asking that you approve this in concept, and Laura will work with legislative staff, with the industry, to tweak it. And if anything substantive comes forward, we'll bring it back to the board. I don't anticipate that happening, but it could. But that's what we like in this particular proposal.
Madam Chair, I so move.
And to clarify, this deals just with, right now we're just talking about 7027, and then we'll attend to the other three motions as we go through it.
Okay, as stated, any further comment? It's been moved and seconded per the comments from Registrar Sams. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? The motion carries.
Okay, so continuing, 7011.4 we just went over, was the first one. The second one, which we just had a motion on, was 7027.2. The third one is 7110.5. This, again, is really a clarification, because what's going on right now is that when the Labor Commissioner has a willful or deliberate violation of the Labor Code, the CSLB is required, upon being notified, to initiate disciplinary action against the licensee within 30 days of notification. That's really just impracticable. And so what we're trying to do is revise the law so that it allows us that we may initiate a disciplinary action, and our goal is to include in the website a cross-reference to the action by the Labor Commissioner. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a statement on the license check that is going to read that the CSLB is aware of a potential Labor Code violation, and there's a click-on link that can identify the Labor Code violation for any contractors or owners that might be hiring that contractor. So it's actually a much better notification to the world that there's a Labor Code violation than the current requirement that requires the CSLB to initiate an action which could take years to come to fruition. So it's a flexibility again for the CSLB, and it's a flexibility that was approved by the committee as presented. And again, going with that, we're going to put these three motions in at one time. 7017 is the final one in front of the committee. Well, I'm sorry, I should have asked. Are there any public comments or questions, or any board questions about 7110.5?
I just had one question. So the proposed language at the bottom of that page, it's just a matter of, maybe legal can answer that, or this. Is that illusory, that language? I mean, the may initiate disciplinary action.
What it does, it gives the board discretion to initiate disciplinary action. Right now, under the current language, you have to initiate disciplinary action, and depending upon the nature of the finding, that may or may not be warranted. You may want to initiate a citation instead of basically an accusation. So what it does, it gives you the board discretion to do what it feels appropriate under the circumstances.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, I'll let you do the next.
Please.
The labor one you're just using as an example, it's all, is that true? Is it all of the different groups that we're going to be taking, David?
Well, this goes along with the board's approval to disclose or to link to Caltrans, to local awarding agencies, to state government agencies. But this is specific to the certified copy of Labor Commissioner actions that are being taken. It's part of the 5 that we would be disclosing, but it is specific to those actions that we're made aware of. But we need this flexibility for our disclosure, our new disclosure strategy to work.
I agree. Okay. I mean, the flexibility is important. I just was curious. Do you think there'll come a time when you'll do this for each one of them, or it's just more important because of the labor code issue?
We're hoping to do it for all 5 of the different actions, 5 other government agencies, but This one is the most troubling because as it has a statute that requires that we take action, and that ties our hands when we would simply like to disclose to the Labor Commissioner's website.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, the final motion that we approved was 7017. In simple terms, this allows there's a fund called under miscellaneous expenses that the CSLB uses to rent homes, basically, to do their sting operations. Right now, that fund has $2,000 in it, which is grossly inadequate, and we're increasing that to a request for $20,000, which should be sufficient for the 70 or 80 sting operations that we're trying to do each year. Any questions or comments from the public or from the board? Okay, so pretty straightforward then. We'll go back and hit these one at a time, might be easiest. So can we have a motion approving 7011.4 as presented, which changes the language from a separate enforcement division to using our current enforcement division to issue notices of appear. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? So moved. The second, we've already had a motion on the second item on the agenda, which was 7010. The second one we already did, which is 7027.2. The third one is 7110.5. That deals with the 30-day notification. And we are requesting approval for the registrar to that the registrar may initiate disciplinary action against the licensee rather than shall initiate disciplinary action against the licensee when reported by the Labor Commissioner. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed? So moved. And the third item would be 7017, which increases the miscellaneous expense account from $2,000 to $20,000. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? So moved.
Did we get the motion on that?
I'll make a motion on.
We didn't have a motion? Help me out. Give me a motion, Bob. Do we have a second?
Second.
There we go. All those in favor? All those opposed? Did I get them all? Oof.
Oh, the committee report.
Okay, could we also, as a final item, could we have a motion to approve our committee report of November 18th, 2013?
Motion to approve, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Laura, would you like to go over the pending? We have separated this out, just FYI for everybody. Through, exactly. So Pastor made a wonderful suggestion. So you have the green section, which is the enacted legislation. If anybody has any questions, obviously Laura's our person to answer those questions. And then the pending legislation, Laura could give us a brief synopsis.
Specifically, I had a question about AB 972, the electrician's certification.
Yes.
It's conspicuously absent of a position like all the others have.
That's not intentional. That's an oversight on my part. But the board has not taken a position on it, so it's just a watch for the staff at this point. I don't think I've presented it to the board in the past. But as an FYI, I also don't expect that bill to make it out of committee this coming year.
You don't expect it to make it out of committee? Thank you.
Any other questions on legislative matters? Madam Chair, we're complete with our report. Sorry, Kevin.
On page 2, we talk about the recommendation of not pursuing 263, which amended 7031. Is that, I know that went to, or at least I understood that went to a 2-year bill. Is that dead?
SB 263 or AB 993, I'm sorry.
The one
Either.
that dealt with the 7031 and the disgorgement and the sword and shield.
So we had provisions in SB 263 earlier this year that would have amended Business and Professions Code 7031. Those provisions were removed at the request of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The bill itself is still moving along and is a 2-year bill. The committee said they would work with us to try to address the issue if we could present examples of the problems that we were trying to fix with the language. We weren't able to provide enough information to kind of document the problem that exists out there. So at this point, we're suggesting that we not pursue the language any further.
Any other comments or questions? Madam Chair, I think we're done now.
All right, thank you both. Agenda I, Licensing Committee Report. Karen Robinson will give us that report, along with Frank. We hate to leave you out, Frank. It's your birthday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Licensing Committee Report, Agenda Item I-1, the review and approval of the October 21st, 2013 Licensing Committee meeting. The Licensing Committee met on October 21st in Sacramento. The meeting summary is in your packet. In addition to the program updates, the licensing staff provided a presentation on the application experience verification process. Do any board members have any comments regarding the minutes? Are there any public comments regarding the minutes? I would like to request a motion to approve the summary report of the October 21st, 2013 Licensing Committee meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passed. Agenda item I, 2, and 3, the licensing program update. Licensing Chief Karen Robinson will now provide the licensing and testing program updates.
Thank you. Before I go into the pages in the packet, I just wanted to comment, as Mr. Shedder raised. We did do an experience verification demonstration at the last licensing committee meeting. And at that time, there were a couple of representatives from the schools there who asked, could we do a similar training for them? So with the assistance of our absolutely amazing public affairs office, we put together a presentation, and the licensing division staff provided specialized training at our Sacramento headquarters office on December 4th last week. The training was intended to clarify the experience verification process that's used to confirm an applicant's journey level work. In addition to those who attended, which was probably a couple of dozen in the room itself, the webcast drew more than 80 additional participants. So we had over 100 individuals taking part in this training. We also did it so that those who were watching by webcast could email in questions, and there was an interactive process for them right then and there. We read the question and it was answered. The presentation was designed to help explain how the verification process can speed up the application process. And it was designed for both individual applicants as well as the schools and anyone anxious to keep their license application moving forward. The feedback from those who took part in the training has been really positive. And with the success of this training, we're going to be exploring opportunities in the future to put on such presentations on various topics that have to do with the licensing division. The webcast is available on our website, and if any of you haven't had a chance to watch it, I would encourage you to take a look. Okay, so moving on now to the regular program update. On pages 1 and 2 are the license application workload charts. And while last fiscal year we continued to see a decline in the applications, so far this quarter for fiscal year 2013-14, we are now seeing just a very slight little increase in the overall applications received. And you can see on the bottom chart, or on the chart at the bottom of page 1, that last little quarter there, we received over 6,000 total applications, whereas this time last year we had only about 5,600. Then it's broken down on page 2 for you by the total number of applications received per month of all applications, and then broken down by the type of application at the bottom chart. Limited liability companies, page 3 and 4, just again, some statistical data on how it's going. We continue to receive LLC applications, and we continue to have to reject them at a high rate. This may be an area that we can explore for some sort of training in the future, because even though we tell them, here's the reason these are getting rejected, and we try to get the information out so we'll get them right the first time, you can see we're not really seeing much of a decrease on the number we have to reject. And we don't want to reject any more than they want them to be rejected.
Is there some sort of consistent issue that...
Well, we've listed the main reasons. Especially when it first started out, it was that Secretary of State's records did not match what they were sending on their application, and often it was because it hadn't been processed yet at Secretary of State. I think everyone knows they had this huge backlog, so what do they call it, the statement of personnel, or the statement of information that has to list all the personnel, what they submitted on their app didn't jive with what was at Secretary of State. That was the biggest reason. Then you have your usual, forgot to sign it, forgot to check a box. The name style doesn't match the type of license that's being applied for. Just the same type of typical reasons we see on all applications.
So do we have some statement on the site that says, this information must match what?
Yes, and I believe we have a statement we include with the application as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen.
So hopefully we'll see some improvement there. The workers' comp recertification, that took effect January 1st, 2012. We implemented starting with those that expired March 31st, 2013, and you can see at the bottom the number of renewals that are mailed per month. The ones not requiring recertification are those that either have a workers' comp policy already on file, or they're inactive. The others, the renewal requiring recertification, those are ones that have an active workers' comp exemption on file, and they have to recertify that, yes, I'm still exempt from workers' comp. Of those that required recertification, on page 6, you'll see the breakdown of those that were processed, meaning they signed it, and those that we had to reject because they failed to recertify their workers' comp exemption. The disposition of application reports is pretty self-explanatory. It's just where applications are in the process from the time that they were received. I think we all know the application processing route by now. Fingerprint background unit, the stats on page 9 indicate the number of fingerprint reports we're getting, how many hits we're getting, meaning they had a criminal record, the number of applications denied, those that appealed, and then the probationary licenses that we've issued. The Licensing Information Center, our call center. Good news again, we're completely full. We got all our positions filled again. Now, like before, expect in about 2 weeks we'll have another vacancy, but for now we're very happy. And I think it really shows in the stats and how the call center performance has improved, that we have all our positions filled. We've been doing some really intense training with the new people coming on. Last year, we hired a couple of retired annuitants to cover peak times, so it's really resulted in a much more efficient call center process. The judgment unit information and statistics start on page 13. There's a little description of what the judgment unit does on page 12. They handle all reported outstanding liabilities, judgments, and claims on bonds. And you'll see the breakdown starting on page 13, first for the outstanding liabilities. These are reported to us by Department of Industrial Relations, Franchise Tax Board, EDD. The next page is judgments. That's just what it sounds like. Someone's gotten a judgment against contractor and notifies us. So there's the stats for that, and of course the savings to the public are listed under each one. Same with bond payment of claims. And then the bottom chart on page 15 is a total of all of these areas and the amount of money that we have been instrumental in helping collect for the public and other agencies. Then on pages 16 through 19, something I usually just kind of go over very quickly or just reference, but we do have new board members, so I thought I would just explain what this all means. These are broken down by the types of applications that we get at the board. And when I say applications, it can be an application for a new license, it can be a renewal application, an application to change officers. We call most everything an application. So when the application comes in the door, it's date stamped, and then these charts show you when it was pulled for processing. That means from the date it came in the door, when did it take actually pull it to start reviewing it and working on it. And these charts show you by week just how long, well, it's broken down by month, but the lines show how many weeks it took to pull for process. And you will see areas, peaks and valleys on a lot of these, and there are a number of reasons for that. For example, original exam or original license that requires an exam, we almost always see March, April, May as peak time periods. So the time obviously goes up for it to get pulled for processing. Workers' comp is another area where there are peaks to this process. We get a whole bunch of renewals in October for workers' comp policies, happens again in January. So as those go up, we can't just throw more people at it. So obviously, you're going to see those time periods go up a little bit. It also can vary depending on staff turnover, staff absences. For example, we have a home improvement salesperson application that basically is staffed by one person. So if that person's out sick or on vacation, those time periods are going to go up. We've been working on cross-training people so that we don't in the future just have one person carrying the entire workload. So that's basically what those charts indicate to you, is how long it took from the time a document came in our door before somebody pulled it and started working on it. Okay, so that is the licensing, and unless there's any questions on that, I'll move on to testing. Okay, well, testing. First off, the testing division chief position is vacant. It's in the process of being filled, and Wendy Balvans, am I getting that right, is acting as our interim chief at this time. You'll see on page 1 the exam administration unit statistics showing that this unit, who's responsible for administering the board's 45 examinations at the 8 locations, and this is the total number of examinations scheduled from November of 2012 up through October of this year. Then if you look on page 2, for that same time period, it breaks it down to the specific testing center and how many examinations were scheduled there. Then the examination development unit is responsible for ensuring that the 45 examinations are written and maintained and updated in accordance with testing standards. If you look down at the chart, it shows the occupational analysis and exam development projects currently underway. They also recently completed occupational analysis for the B general building contractor and the C35 lathing and plastering. In addition, 2 new exams were released, the C55 water conditioning and the C57 well drilling. Finally, if you look on page 4, with the 2013 California building codes becoming effective this upcoming January, they've also worked in a bunch of code workshops in addition to their normal workload, and it lists here the completed code update workshops that they've done. And I think that's it for the testing update, unless there's any questions about that.
Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the item I4, the review and approval of Construction Management Education Account Committee proposal regarding grants to qualifying programs. The Construction Management Education Account was established for the benefit of qualified post-secondary institutions that offer specified construction management education programs. The Act provides for the fund program to be administered by the CSLB. Karen will now provide the update on the 2013 CMEA grant awards.
Okay, in your packet, you have the notice of intent to award the grants from the registrar to the board members. This is for this year's grant awards, but just to give a brief background on the Construction Management Education Act, which we called the CMEA. As Frank mentioned, it was passed in 1991, and the purpose of which was to establish a grant fund for the benefit of qualified post-secondary institutions that offer specialized construction management education programs. It provides for the fund program to be administered by the Contractors Board and overseen by the CMEA Advisory Committee. The CMEA Advisory Committee is established in statute and includes 11 members, and they must be from specified organizations. Contractors and applicants can contribute to the CMEA account on any application, which would include an application for original licensure, as well as on the renewal applications. That money is then put into the CMEA fund. Each year, we correspond with the schools that have these construction management programs, and we provide them with an application for them to complete and make their request for a CMEA award. There are a number of criteria that they have to meet. They have to indicate how many individuals went through the program, graduated the program. The programs must lead to a bachelor degree and be accredited by the American Council for Construction Education. Once they complete this application, approximately 2 to 3 weeks before the due date, we compile a summary report that goes to the CMEA Advisory Committee, which is made up of those 11 individuals I mentioned earlier. They will then review this summary report and give their approval or ask their questions about the grant awards. Once that has been completed and the committee has reviewed and approved it, we then submit it to the registrar to make the notice of intent and bring it to you, which we're here to do today. So, unless there are any specific questions about the CMEA fund or how the process works, I'm going to turn it back over to Frank.
Madam Chair, I would move approval of the grants as contained in the memo to the board.
Second motion.
Should we take public comments before we take the vote? Any public comments? Back to the motions. In a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. I now request a motion to approve the registrar's notice of intent to award the CMEA grants as provided in the December 10th, 2013 memo.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, Matt jumped the gun and made your
I'm
motion.
sorry.
We're done, deal?
Yeah, it's done.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a little too fast for me.
Matt made the motion before he asked
Okay.
for it. The summary report? We already, you did that one. Oh, yeah.
Madam Chair, that's the end of our report.
All right. Thank you, Karen and Frank. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item J, which is the Executive Committee report. And the Executive Committee met on November 18th in Sacramento. At that time, I briefed the committee on some travels that I had in Southern California, right here in Southern California, for the California Economic Summit. And just, I'm going to briefly say what that was all about. Which it was a gathering of a lot of educators, business folks from up and down the state, foundations, state and local government agencies and legislators, pretty much anyone having a hand in the current economic state of affairs in our state, which is all of us and everyone else. So we had all these leaders converge in Los Angeles to discuss basically the economic state of the state. It was eye-opening. I encourage all of you to Google California Economic Summit. It's a great website, or you'll have to Google to get the website. With that, I'm going to move on to notes from our executive committee meeting. At the meeting, staff provided updates regarding the administrative, information technology, and budget programs. And also Tom Roy from Solid, if you remember him from our strategic planning last year, he attended the meeting to review the timeline and proposed process for the upcoming strategic planning session that will be in April in San Diego, I believe. This will be discussed later in the meeting by Steve. Also, the executive committee reviewed the board member administrative manual, and this will be presented to the board for approval at the February board meeting. Do any board members have any comments regarding the executive committee meeting? Is there any public comment on this item? All right, at this time, I'd ask for a motion to approve the executive committee meeting.
So moved.
Second? Did we get a second? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Cindy Christensen will now present the administrative update.
Thank you, Joan. On page 1 of the administrative update, you'll see a summary of what's going on with the facilities as far as remodels or contract negotiations. We've been briefing you on the Berkeley site, and we're hoping that everybody will be moved in January 31st. That date has not been moving yet. As far as contracts and procurement, we do have a few for CHP for standby security, and we're also just doing maintenance agreements, fax machines, and shredding services. Going to page 2, just want to update you that we have ordered new ergonomic chairs and conference room furniture for almost all of our office. You see Bakersfield, Norwalk, Oxnard, Sacramento, San Diego, and Valencia. And as David reported earlier, we do have all of the 25 vehicles that were ordered earlier. Records management, we are continuing to purge files and scan files into the IWAS system. Moving on to personnel, we have a few examinations going on. That's on page 3. There have been a few position changes since the last board meeting. We've had about 11 transfers, and those are shown on page 3. We also have training. There's a little summary here on training and development assignments, and that assists our employees if they want to move into a different career path. So, for instance, if we have an analyst that would like to move into an enforcement position, they can do a training and development assignment. while they're preparing their skills to be able to qualify to take the exam. On page 4, this just tells you that we have approximately 39 vacancies as of November 22nd, and that table lays out where those position vacancies are.
So are there any board members with comments regarding this update? Public members or public with public comments? Anyone out there? Okay, thank you. Now for the information technology update. Cindy will also give that report.
On the first page, there's an update regarding Breeze. The Phase 1 has gone up, I believe, as of early October, and it's doing pretty well. I guess the update as to this point is there was a certain chunk of money that was available for the Phase 1 boards, and that could not be paid out until Phase 1 was up and running. So that has been paid out to Accenture. There still needs to be more money added in by an amendment. That contract has gone through, and hopefully that money will be ready to go as of January 1st, and then Phase 2 will start up. Our Phase 3 will probably, they believe that will be up by the end of, what was it, 2015, Steve? I believe it was the end of 2015. So, but that may change too, just depending on how Phase 2 goes. Our IT staff are working on the RPA personnel tracking application, and that's moving along very good. We've got some really good IT staff, and they're working with personnel so that they can track where our packages go, and then when it goes to Consumer Affairs, and track the number of days that it's there. On page 2, we're working on our enterprise backup and storage systems, and for what you need to know for that is the event of a disaster, all of our files will be backed up, and that will be in Fresno. Apparently that's the safest spot in the state of California to maintain records. And then, as Rick told you earlier, we've done the intranet redesign. There's a few snapshots of that on page 3 showing you the old and the new. Seems to have been received really well by staff. There's also some other snapshots on page 3. There's also an update on the disclosure of partnering agencies disciplinary action project. That's on page 5. There's also some snapshots there on page 6 and 7 of that project as well. On page 8, gives you a graph of how many, where our IT service desk or our help desk, where most of that help is reported and needed, and you'll see most of it's in Sacramento, but that's where most of our staff are located. And then we also have the interactive voice response system on page 8, and on page 9 it gives you a table of which are the top choices when our applicants go in there. And page 10 is just a graph of that. So any questions?
Comments from the public on the IT update? All right, moving to the budget update, Cindy Christensen will also give that report.
So for the budget update, we're about a quarter of the way in. This gives you up through October 31st, which is 4 months in. There really aren't any surprises. You'll see that we're right on track of where we should be in terms of our expenditures in all line items. Revenue, we're seeing just a little change at 2%, so we're still doing pretty well there. You will see an increase in penalty assessments and delinquent renewal fees. On page 2, this is our fund condition as we go out to the year 2015-16. When you look at this, you have to remember that, as you see in 2013-14, we have about a 4-month reserve. We'll probably be saving some money from this year, probably about $3 million. So as that rolls over into the subsequent years, we're hoping that that will carry us out with not having to do a fee increase in the near future. And Karen just went over the construction management education account. And most importantly, we are running out of money in that and probably will not be giving any grants out since there won't be anything there to be giving. And as far as the executive summary, that's on page, really aren't any page numbers, but that follows the CMEA. And this just gives you a snapshot of the applications, original licenses issued, licenses renewed, and complaints and CSLB position vacancies, just so that it's in one place if you ever need to refer to it in the future. And that's it.
Any board member comments on the budget update? Public comments? Thank you, Cindy, for providing all of those updates. I know in the past that you've, or the person in your position has had to share them, not had to, but it's been supported by actual IT staff. So for you to do all of these updates, you never get the commendation you deserve, but I want to thank you and on behalf of the board for just understanding all of this and making it understandable to us. Thank you. So next, agenda item K.
J.
I'm sorry, number 5 under, we're still in J. Number 5, Steve Sands will present the strategic planning process.
Okay, the first thing in that agenda item is an update on all of the objectives. Part of the strategic planning process in April will be to review all of them, where we are. So any board members have any questions on those objectives? Okay, we have the task list. Basically, the work will start in February, where the facilitators will meet with senior staff. They're going to do a couple survey monkeys to try and get background information. Then they'll be interviewing board members in February, with the thought being that we'll go back to San Diego in April for a 2-day strategic planning session where we'll update our strategic plan. Any questions on the process? You'll be getting more and more information from us as we get closer. Okay, thanks.
All right, moving to agenda item K, Steve Sands will provide the tentative schedule.
February 19th, it will be in the Bay Area. We're in a sign that the economy is improving. We're having a real hard time finding a hotel in downtown San Francisco that'll honor the state rate. So we're kind of looking at the airport area now, unless board members have any other serious ideas. That looks like the most choices. Like I said, the airport, the Hyatt, there's a couple other hotels around there that have the state rate. Are there any issues or comments from the board members about that location?
San Jose, something near.
We had trouble finding San Jose too. They're really doing well too. I mean, go to Fresno, easy, but yeah. Yeah.
The Fresno Bay Area.
Place in California.
Well,
Only for data storage.
For data storage, it's the same. Oh.
Not Marin County, not Sausalito, not Tiburon. No.
How about Napa Valley?
But really, the Bay Area, because things are so busy.
Santa Barbara.
We're having trouble in Berkeley. Really, the main places we're finding are South Bay. We can continue looking, but are you okay with that?
Yeah, the Hyatt he's talking about is in Burlingame.
It's a big one. It's pretty nice.
It's not, there's a shuttle bus from the airport.
Yeah.
It's real close to the airport. All right, that's what we'll probably end up shooting for, but Aaron will be trying to figure that out next week or so. And then we got San Diego, Shelter Island again probably. And then Newport Beach, June 6th, we'll be having our joint meeting with the Nevada board. Again, I think it'll be the hotel we were at 2 years ago.
San Diego and Shutter Island?
Did you control your board members? Thank you. Any questions on the board meeting locations? Okay, thank you.
All right, so back to my control and agenda item L. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all those in favor? Opposed? All right, we're adjourned.